Okay, we are holding Daf Tes in Chagiga by the Mishnah, 4 lines from the top. So we had discussed until now a lot of different halachas as it pertains to coming to the Beis Hamikdash for the Gimel Regalim, for Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. We discussed the carbon Re'iyah, we discussed the carbon Chagiga. These are different karbanos one must bring. Now, just at the outset, just to understand, so we spoke about the Re'iyah and the Chagiga, that one must bring it ideally on the first day of Yom Tov, right? You bring the carbon on the first days of Yom Tov. And separately, there's a mitzvah of simcha throughout the rest of Yom Tov. Every day, a person has to eat meat of a carbon, but their primary karbanos that are chiyuv and that are obligatory are the carbon, the olas re'iyah, and the shalmei chagiga. So those are brought on the first day of Yom Tov. Let's say someone did not have the ability to bring it on the first day of Yom Tov. The halacha is you can bring it on the second day. And if you don't bring it on the second day, you bring it on the third day, and all the way to the end of Yom Tov. The Mishnah is going to be primarily discussing this idea of tashlumin, the idea that if I miss the first day for whatever reason, I bring it on the second day.
I thought that was a machlokes.
No, tashlumin you could always bring. We'll see in the Gemara today, and we referenced earlier. There's a machlokes how to understand the concept that when I'm doing the tashlumin, what exactly am I doing? Am I doing tashlumin of the first day, or is every day its own chiyuv? That we'll see in today's Gemara. But good memory. Yeah. Okay. So let's read the Mishnah. Mishaloi chag b'yom tov harishon shel chag. A person did not bring his carbon chagiga, and again these halachas are referenced as chag, but this is going to apply both to a chagiga and to a re'iyah. When we're discussing the laws of tashlum, of makeups, the makeups are going to be true for both of these obligatory carbons. So again, mishlei chag b'yom tov harishon shel chag, a person for whatever reason wasn't able to bring the carbon on the first day, chagig as kol haregel, he can then continue to bring it any other day. And it doesn't make a difference. Even if you got negligent and you were lazy, it doesn't matter. You have the entire Yom Tov to bring it, and if you brought it, as long as you got it in during the Yom Tov, you've been yotze your mitzvah and you're good to go. Not only that, and by the way, this Mishnah here is talking about Sukkot, and the Gemara says, "V'yom tov achron shel chag," and not only can you bring it through the 7 days of Sukkot, you can even bring it on the quote-unquote 8th day of Sukkot, which isn't really the 8th day of Sukkot. It's the first day and only day of Shmini Atzeres, which we know is a regel b'fnei atzmo. It's its own Yom Tov, which is a big chiddush. We'll see in the Gemara that's going to be the main discussion. How can you tell me that I can take my chiyuv chagiga of Sukkot and bring it up on another holiday? Now, granted, there are some things that we say Shmini Atzeres is like Sukkot, and there are other things that we say it's not like Sukkot. I mean, it's clear and obvious that Art Scroll puts it in one machzor, so for all the rest of us, that clearly means it's one Yom Tov. But in many areas, we know it's two different Yom Tovs. We call it the second days, but there's really no such thing, right? Meaning Shmini Atzeres is called Shmini, right? We call it Shmini Atzeres. That's the way it is in the Matbeah HaTfilah, Shmini Atzeres. So clearly, on some level, there's a connection with the first 7 days, and this is the 8th day. But on the other hand, we don't sit in a sukkah, we don't shake lulav and esrog, the davening changes. It's clearly a different Yom Tov. So when it comes to Tashlumin, it seems from our Mishnah that we treat it like Sukkot, meaning that I have a Chagiga on the first day, and I didn't bring it, and I went all the way through all 7 days of Sukkot. I can still bring that Chagiga, my Chagiga, on Shmini Atzeres. Shmini Atzeres does not have its own Chagiga. Meaning it's not like davening mincha twice, right? Meaning Shmini Atzeres, I bring up my carbon chagiga for Sukkot. Over haregel, let's say Yom Tov passed v'lo chag, and a person just missed it, right? Einoi chayav b'achriuso. Einoi chayav b'achriuso is a language that's typically reserved for when a person lost the carbon, right? Meaning what we're really basically saying over here is pretty much you lost out, meaning you had an opportunity for 7 days or 8 days for Sukkot in Shmini Atzeres to bring this carbon chagiga. You didn't do it. On the 9th day, there is no bringing up of your carbon chagiga. In fact, we say, let's say a person was mafresh an animal for his chagiga, got lazy or whatever it is, or he lost it. He lost it on day 2. So he never was able to bring it up, right? And so now Yom Tov ends. Do we say that he has a chiyuv to go and find another animal and bring it up to make it up? The answer is no. Once Yom Tov passes, your chiyuv to do tashlumin and your opportunity to do tashlumin goes away. Al zeh nemer, and this is what we refer to when the pasuk says me'uvas lo yuchal liskon, like something that's crooked that cannot be fixed. The chisaron, and something that's lacking or deficient, lo yuchal lihimanos, that cannot be, and literally the word limanos means counted, but it means basically this phrase in I think it's in Kahelis, right? Where is this pasuk? Yeah, it's in Kahelis. V'chisaron lo yuchal lihimanos. This is a generic statement. There are some things that one does that the effect of that is permanent enough that one cannot go back on it. Meaning, now,
what are you chayav if you don't bring it?
Well, so you're being mevatel a mitzvah seseh, so there's no chiyuv, there's no punishment in the classic sense. But I mean, Hashem, I'm sure we'll figure out a way to patch you, but that's not. Yeah. So either way, so the Mishnah is telling us. Okay, so the Mishnah is telling us Me'uvas lo yuchal liskan v'chisaron lo yuchal limanos, according to the Tanakama, is a person who doesn't bring his chagiga. A person doesn't bring his chagiga and he loses out. This is what it means when the pasuk says Me'uvas lo yuchal liskan v'chisaron lo yuchal limanos. Now, Shimon ben Manasseh Omer, he says no. He says Ezehu Me'uvas she'eno yuchal liskan. What is that referring to? Zehabala erva v'hoylid mimena mamzer. He says, we're talking about if I tell you that something is impossible to rectify, you can't tell me that it's talking about a case of a chagiga. He says I need something that has more of a permanent sense in the world. So he says that's an example. What would be an example? If a person has a person has a child with one of the ervas that creates a mamzer, right? We'll see when we get to the beginning of Yavam. It's a big list of some of them. Yeah. So any one of those sexual relationships will lead to a kid that's a mamzer. Well, that mamzer is a mamzer. There's no such thing as, what is it? Putting in the back of the box, whatever it is. You can't unring that bell. Once you create a mamzer, it's a mamzer. There's no tshuva on a mamzer. You can't make him not a mamzer anymore, right? So therefore, he says that's what it means when it says something that is crooked, that cannot be fixed, is a person who has bia with an erva and creates a mamzer.
What's the definition of an erva?
Erva is literally nakedness, but it's the relationships that are prohibited. So your mother, your sister, your wife's sister, your brother's wife. There are a series of relationships one's not allowed to have that asar min Torah, that you chayiv either misa or kares for if you have them, meaning if you have sex with that woman. If you produce a child with that woman, most chayiv krisis except for nida will create a mamzer.
So it's not something out of wedlock.
That's the phrase that people use,
right?
But technically speaking, it depends. If you have bia with a woman who she herself is married, then that would create a mamzer. But out of wedlock is really referring to like a shotgun wedding, right? That's when out of wedlock is when that's.
Then I'm married, or they never.
No, that's something else.
It's a guy, it's a mamzer.
No. Adarabba. You can only a Jew can create a mamzer because only in a place of kedusha can you have something coming out like that. A guy can't create a mamzer.
By the way, the Alter Rebbe says that if their tshuva is so high that then because of it the mamzer passes away, so then.
So the Alter Rebbe is quoting from the Chavos Halvavos.
Yeah.
That's what the Chavos Halvavos. The tremendous Chavos Halvavos says that if a person is able to do, we'll see in a second. What we're discussing over here is it's mu'uvas she'ena yochel liskan. You can't fix it even with tshuva, right? So it says Rosh Manasi, and he explains it's the halacha. He says, because maybe you'll tell me, no, it's talking about someone who steals. That can't be. And I can always just give back what I stole, do tshuva, and I'm good to go. I'm back. Right? We know that tshuva me'ava makes your averos like mitzvahs, and tshuva me'ava can help you if you had bia with an erva, but you can never make the mamzer ois mamzer. He's a mamzer, he's always a mamzer, right? So therefore, he says that's the case of muvas lo yochel liska, and you're referencing an idea very quickly, and the Chavos Halvavos says that tshuva has such a power that if a person is able to rise to a tshuva that is so deep and so penetrating that it can affect the hashgacha, where if a person needs, his tshuva rises to that level, and I have this walking, talking proof that I did this aveira, then Hashem will take that person from the world in order for your tshuva to be complete, which is a very difficult idea to think about, but you referenced it, so I'll mention it. But either way, Reb Shimon ben Yochai Omer, he argues. He says, "Ein kairin mu'uvas el lamisha haya metukan mitchila v'nesavis." The word crooked means you weren't born crooked. You started straight. You went off, and the crookedness is now unable to be ever made to be fixed again. The Ezeh, and what is that? It's a Talmud Chacham haparish min haTorah. It's a Talmud Chacham who's parish min haTorah. Very difficult statement in the Mishnah. Meaning, what do you mean? Are you telling me a tzaddik who goes off the derech can't come back? It's a difficult thing. So you have to understand exactly what it means over here. Haparish min haTorah means over here is a person who runs away from the Torah and never comes back. Meaning, I don't think what it means is that you don't have the opportunity for tshuva. Of course, you have the opportunity for tshuva. Person goes off the derech and he stays off the derech. This is something that, on some level, that's something that's unacceptable.
But the pasuk makes it difficult because it's a crooked thing that cannot be made straight. So if we can come back,
it's a little bit difficult what he's referring to over here. But either way, so we have a Mishnah, the beginning of the Mishnah, which is really the primary component, which is the dinim of Tashlumin of a Chagiga, are what we're going to discuss. So what do we say in the Mishnah? We said in the Mishnah that a person doesn't bring his Chagiga on the first day of Sukkot, he can bring it all the way up into and including Shmini Atzeres, which is a big chiddush. Ask the Gemara, Menani Mili. Where do you know this very big idea, because you want to tell me that you could take it through all of Sukkot. That makes sense. You're going to tell me that you can use it on an entirely different yontif, regel b'fnei atzmai. That doesn't make sense. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shmuel, nemer atzeres b'shvi'i shel Pesach. It says atzeres by Pesach, and it's specifically by shvi'i shel Pesach, the last day of Pesach. V'nemer atzeres b'shmini shel Chag. So I have it written over here because the Gemara didn't want to help me out.
When you can say Tashlich, also Shmini Atzeres?
Yes. No, Hoshana Rabbah, really. Hoshana Rabbah, the day before. Yeah. Hoshana Rabbah. It's a tshuva related issue. Hoshana Rabbah is considered.
I'm sorry to get off track, but I knew it was something like.
Hoshana Rabbah is the last official day of Sukkot. Shmini Atzeres is the first day of its own yontif. Yes, it was Torah, which is nowadays. But either way, so it says Atzeres in both places. Now, what is Atzeres? So Atzeres, you have a pasuk in Re'eh. The pasuk says Sheishes Yomim Tochel Matzos by Pesach. It says V'yoyim Hashvi Atzeres LaHashem Elokecha. It's an Atzeres. The 7 days in Atzeres. Leisasem Malach. You shouldn't do Malacha. And it says in the pasuk in Pinchas by Sukkot, it says V'yoyim Hashmini, which is Shmini Atzeres. V'yoyim Shmini Atzeres Tiyalachem, which is where we get the words Shmini Atzeres. So you see, it says Atzeres in both places, and the Gemara says like this: Ma'ala halon l'tashlumin, just like by Pesach, the 7th day of Pesach can still be used for the tashlumin. That if you didn't bring a Chagiga on the first day, avkan l'tashlumin, and also to over here it's l'tashlumin. Meaning to say that the fact that I have Atzeres here and Atzeres there, that Zera Shava of Atzeres tells me that whatever applies here, I'm going to apply it over there. Well, what's the story with this 7th day? It's a day of tashlumin. So to over here, now you can ask a million questions over here. What kind of Gzera Shava is that? The Gzera Shava between one holiday and another. This holiday isn't the same holiday as the other holiday. The whole point was that it's Shmini Atzeres is its own holiday. So you're telling me that I can make up my Sukkos because the reason why I can make up the Pesach from first day to the 7th day is because all 7 days is Pesach. The reason why I have a problem making up my Chagiga on the 8th day is because it's not really the 8th day; it's the first day of another holiday. What does this Atzeres help? This is the Gzera Shava. The Gzera Shava is somehow solving that, but really, on the surface, it would seem that it's a very difficult Gzera Shava to make. You want to ask a question?
Could you say that Atzeres B'dafka really the nature of Atzeres is that it's not its own holiday, but it's like a higher kedusha of the same holiday.
Yeah, you could say a million things, but in the end of the day, halacha lamaisa, we treat it like its own holiday. Meaning, you don't shake lulav, we don't do anything. I mean, really, the holidays are two different holidays. Right. The idea that my chagiga, which is a yontiv halacha, applies even on the 8th day is a little bit difficult. So the Gemara is saying it's a Gzera Shava, and the Gemara is going to explain why this Gzera Shava works despite what I just said. And the Gemara says mufne, just outside very quickly. There are Gzera Shavas, and then there are Gzera Shavas. Meaning, if I have a Gzera Shava where there's a Masorah that this word and that word are connected, and there's a deep idea that means in Masorah we understand that I can connect this idea to that idea. But you can ask questions like I just asked. Well, what do you mean? Maybe this is a problem. Maybe don't learn the Gzera Shava because this reason has a chumrah. I can't pull from there. This reason has a kula. That's only on a Tuesday. This is on a Sunday. You can't, meaning you can ask questions on a Gzera Shava. Gzera Shava isn't just simply, it says in the Torah, I got to listen to it. Because if there's a question and you don't want to make the comparison, you can ask the question. But that's only true when the words that are connected are needed for themselves. Meaning if the words have a purpose in the pasuk on their own, you need it for the text to explain something, then you can start asking questions. Because what's the alternative? The alternative is, well, why did the Torah write it? What do you mean, why did the Torah write it? It's needed. But if, let's say, each word is extra, and now it really doesn't have a purpose, and I tell you that by Masorah there's a Gzera Shava there, that's much stronger, because that's like the Torah saying, I don't even need to write this. Why did I write it? For this Gzera Shava itself, you have a kasha, don't ask kashas, it's like a Gzera Sakasa. That's what a mufna is. Now it could be mufna from two sides, it could be mufna from one side, that's not our sugya. But the point is, the Gemara is saying this Gzera Shava is mufna, the ilav mufna, because if it wasn't mufna, the Gemara is going to say the question I just said. You have a major question over here. Ikala mifrach. You have a kasha. Ma lishvi shel Pesach shechein enu chaluk mishel afanav. It's a continuation of the yontif from the beginning. It's the 7th day of Pesach. It's all one yontif. Timer b'shmini shel chag shechaluk mishel afanav. Yontif 1 ends. Sukkot is over, and now you have a new yontif. Who says this new yontif can really connect to the old yontif? So therefore, it's not going to be. It wouldn't work. So therefore, thank God it's mufna. And the Gemara says, and this is a funny word, laye, which basically Rashi tells means the Gemara's way of saying taka, meaning emes. You're right, meaning you're right. If nuye mufna, it's taka mufna, and let's see why it's mufna. Michti. What does the pasuk say? We read them before. Mayatzeres. Right? It says in the pasuk. It says, like I said, Shvi'i atzeres l'Hashem Elokecha lo yisasem malacha. So my atzeres atzor be'atzias malacha. It means don't do malacha. So if that's the case, haksiv, it already says in the pasuk, literally the next word after atzeres is Lashem Elokecha lo sasem malacha. So if the whole point of atzeres is to tell me you're not allowed to do malacha, and then the pasuk then continues and says don't do malacha, atzeres is clearly extra. Atzeres the kasav Rahman Allah Maliyah Lishmamina Lafnuya. It's exactly for this purpose. It's there to be available for us to understand this Gzeir Shava that just like by Pesach, so to Beshmini Atzeres, that you can bring your tashlumin all the way through the 8th day. That's the first version of the Makar from this Gzeir Shava that's Mufna. The Tana brings a different brisa, and in this brisa, it's going to be understood from a different place. The Tana Maisi Lama a different place. The Tanya the brisa says, the pasuk says, "V'chagoysim oisoy chag laHashem shivas yomim." That pasuk is in Sukkot. So by Sukkot itself, it says, "V'chagoysim," you shall celebrate the chag, meaning bring your chagiga. Oisoy it, let's say, chag laHashem as a chag for Hashem, shivas yomim 7 days. The Gemara makes a drush. The Brisa says as follows: I might read that pasuk to understand that you could bring a carbon chagiga every day, meaning to say you're chayiv to bring one every single day, not 1, 7, meaning each day you bring a new one. I might think that's what the pasuk means. Talmud loymar oso v'chagosam oso, which is a singular language, to tell you that no, you only have an obligation to do one. I am Cain. Oso atachogig via tachogig kol shiva im Cain lama nemar shiva. So then why even mention 7? So on that the Gemara says l'tashlumin. So that's in order to teach me that there's a din tashlumin on Sukkot, but that tashlumin l'chara would only be for 7 days, not for the 8 days. And the more important part is v'yom tov ha'achron. How do I know that Shmini Atzeres is included in that? Talmud loymar b'chodesh hashvi'i tachogu oso. Right. So the pasuk is the end of that same pasuk says that in the 7th month you shall celebrate oso it, meaning oso again. What do you see? You see I b'chodesh hashvi'i. Sorry, 1 second. B'chodesh hashvi'i tachogu also teaches you that it's in the month, meaning even beyond the 7 days, the 8th day, which is another day in the month, right? The month is a mechayiv, so therefore the tashlumin goes into that. Ask the Gemara, 1 second. You're using this big word chodesh. It includes significantly more than just one additional day. There's a lot more days in the month of Tishrei. So maybe let's say I b'chodesh hashvi'i yochel yechogig v'holach. They changed the gear, sir. Kol hachodesh kulo. You might think that means you can literally make up your tashlumin all the way until the end of Tishrei. Talmud loymar also. This second time it says also. Here's also a limitation coming to tell you also atachogeg v'i atachogeg chutzalo, meaning you only go on a day of Yontiv and not a day after, whatever. So the price is basically differently than the first statement from Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was quoting Rabbi Shmuel, coming from the Gzeir Shava Atzeres. The Brisa says no, it's coming from extra words in the pasuk itself. It's Gzeir Akasav by Sukkot. And I just want to point out very quickly, we're discussing here how do I know that you can make tashlumin on Shmini Atzeres, and that's a difficult idea. And the Gemara has 2 different drushes. But the idea that, and the Gemara, by the way, shows us that there's also a makor for tashlumin itself. The Gemara explains that where do I know that there's tashlumin by Sukkot? I see that there's tashlumin by Sukkot because it says, at least according to the second drasha, there's a pasuk. It says that the shiva is l'tashlumin. But how do I know that there's tashlumin by Pesach? Meaning the Gzeir Shava originally we said was, since I see that by the 7th day of Pesach there's a tashlumin, so to the 8th day of Sukkot or Shmini Atzeres is tashlumin. Where do I see that there's actually tashlumin by Pesach? All I see is a Mishnah that talks about Chag, a Gemara that talks about Sukkot. I don't see anywhere that the Gemara says I could do tashlumin on Pesach.
Didn't we just say it was Gzeir Shava?
Gzeir Shava is for the 7th day. Well, how do I know on the 7th day there's tashlumin?
No, we said, but if you say there's a Gzeir Shava comes from Pesach to Sukkot. So
yes.
use the Gzeir
So the Gzeir Shava says whatever applies to Pesach applies here, but I still need to know. How do I know over there that's true? Why not say, I have an idea, why not say that just like by Pesach I have to eat matzah, so to over here I have to eat matzah? Or better yet, why not say that so to by Pesach, since I have to, I don't know, right, I'm not allowed to eat chametz, so to say by Sukkot I'm also not allowed to eat. Like, meaning in order to be able to pull from Pesach to here, I have to know that it truly applies to Pesach, right? So there is so it's off the daf, but the Rishonim are bothered by this. The Gemara is just addressing, we're seeing the tip of the iceberg. How do I know that Shmini Atzeres has tashlumin? I learned it from Shvi Shal Pesach. I don't know Shvi Shal Pesach has tashlumin. It doesn't say it in the Gemara. I see in the second brisa that Sukkot does. There's an actual drasha for Sukkot, but how do I know Pesach? So Rashi later on in the Masechta, he says that it comes from Binyanav, Mamatzina. He says, listen, once you see by Sukkot there's tashlumin of 7 days, anytime there's a 7-day yontif, very strange thing, you're going to have a tashlumin. So therefore he says Pesach also has it. Very difficult. There's a Rabbeinu Chananel says it from a Hekesh, the same Hekesh of Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos, so the pasuk says it. That's also difficult. If you read those psukim, that Hekesh is understood to be happening only after we know the dinam of tashlumin. It's a little bit difficult. Then there's a mechilta that they bring. I'm just pointing out that it's not very obvious in the Gemara, but the Rishonim will address it each in their own way to try to find a makar for how do I know that there's actually tashlumin by Pesach? Because we're going to see later on in the Gemara that Sukkot and Pesach, we're going to ask about Shavuos. We're going to see that Shavuos has a din of tashlumin, and we want to know, should it have 7 days or 8 days? Should it have 7 days like Pesach or 8 days like Sukkot? And the Gemara uses that hekesh of Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos to teach it to us. Well, in order to teach it to us, that means that Pesach and Sukkot there have to already be known. You can't tell me that hekesh itself is teaching me Pesach and Shavuos, and then I'm also using that same hekesh to teach me about Shavuos. That wouldn't make sense. But either way, okay, let's go back to it, because the next line in the Gemara here is a little bit challenging, and I want to make sure it's clear. Okay, so what did we just say? We said that we have two different opinions as to what the makar for Shmini Atzeres is. Okay, umay tashlumin. What is tashlumin? Meaning to say, how do we understand when you're bringing a carbon on the second day of Pesach, Sukkot, whatever it is? How do we understand your responsibility? What are you actually accomplishing? Right? Rabbi Yochanan Amar, and this Gemara came up earlier when we were trying to understand what the kol asuya in the Mishnah was, and we came up with different answers, and one of the answers we gave was the nafkamina in this case, which is we said a person who's a chiger b'yom rishon, a person who's lame on day one, he's patur from re'iyah and from chagiga. So he's patur from it on the first day, therefore he's patur for the rest of the time, or is he chayav the rest of the time? We're going to see that that's dependent upon this machlokas, as we'll see. Says the Gemara, tashlum in the rishon. For Rabbi Yochanan Amar, it's tashlum in the rishon, meaning if you miss day one, when you're bringing it on day two, don't view it as day two has its own chiyuv. All you're doing on day two is making up for what you were supposed to do on day one. Whereas Oshaya Amar Tashlumin Zelazeh, no. Day one, you have a chiyuv. If you didn't bring it on day two, Hashem says you have a chiyuv to bring it on day two. If you didn't bring it on day two, Hashem says you have a new chiyuv to bring it on day three. And that goes all the way through. So when you bring it on day five, you're not fulfilling your obligation of day one. You're fulfilling your obligation of day five.
So you can ask a question. So
many questions.
Each day if each day has its own chiyuv, then what are you making up?
It's not that every day has its own chiyuv. Meaning, if I were to say to you right now, on the fifth day of Pesach, do I have a chiyuv to bring a chagiga? The answer is no. I don't have a chiyuv to bring. It's only that if until now I haven't brought a carbon chagiga, now I have a chiyuv to bring.
Well, this is what I'm asking. I'm saying if you didn't do it the day before, and now you do it, so you're not making up. You have a chiyuv to do it. You didn't do it yesterday.
You're right. The language of tashlumin is not to be understood literally according to Rabbi Shaya. You're right.
Right.
According to Rabbi Shaya, it's not really a tashlumin. But we'll see in the Gemara in a moment, really, even according to Rabbi Yochanan, it may not even be really a tashlumin, and we'll see that in a minute. Right, so, okay, so Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shaya are arguing over whether we say that the way the obligation plays itself out, and I don't want to get too lumpish here, but there's really no way to explain this without. Or Chaim Brisker has a very famous idea about something called, well, it's not his idea, but he's the one who made it famous, something called a chalos kinyan. When does something chal? When is it? When is the mechayev? What is the event that is the triggering event for my obligation to come into play? So that's the way he sort of tries to explain it over here. He says, think about it this way. Rabbi Yochanan says, what's the mechayev of my chagiga? Me coming into Yontif. The first day of Yontif is when Yontif comes in. I'm someone who's obligated in this mitzvah. I'm not a woman, I'm not a child, whatever it is. Yontif comes in, I'm chayiv in the mitzvah. Every day now, I have a chiyuv to bring it. And there's a halacha called zrizin makdim la mitzvahs. You should try to do mitzvahs as fast as possible. So therefore, best to do it on the first day.
What do you mean every day you have a chiyuv?
No. Meaning, I have a chiyuv to bring a chagiga, just like you have a chiyuv to put, just like you have a chiyuv every day to say Kriya Shema, right? Now you have a time until when you could say it, but it's a big mitzvah to say it as early as possible because we say zrizin makdim la mitzvahs. A person who's a zaris brings things earlier, right? So same thing over here. There's a mitzvah on the 7 days of Pesach, on the 8 days of Sukkot. You have a chiyuv to bring a chagiga. You should do it. You have one chagiga to bring. Try to do it as early as possible on the first day. You didn't do it on the first day. Do it on the second day. When is that chiyuv chal? When does that start? First day. If let's say a person for whatever reason wasn't around on the first day, he was patur on the first day, he was a shota on the first day, tamei on the first, whatever it's going to be, he's not chayav on the second day. If you're not chayav on the first day, your chiyuv, your chalos chiyuv never happened. There was never a triggering event. So day two, there's no more triggering events. You missed the boat.
So it must be that it's the first day in the morning.
Not necessarily. Okay, maybe.
So then
It's a little complicated. I don't want
to do it. You missed that.
You missed the boat according to Rabbi Yochanan. You missed the boat.
You still have the rest of the holiday.
Not to do chagiga. No, you cannot bring a chagiga. You can, but it's not a chagiga. Your chagiga, your chiyuv chagiga you are only called chayiv to bring a chagiga if you were there and roi and it was appropriate for you to bring a chagiga on the first day. No tashlumin. If you for whatever reason you were absent when they were handing out the assignment on day one, you cannot make it up. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Shaya holds no. Rabbi Shaya says if you weren't there on day one, okay, so you missed the assignment on day one. On day two, there's a new assignment. What's the new assignment? Still got to bring a chagiga. What's the mechayev? The yontiv. The yontiv itself is mechayev.
Can't turn back the clock.
Yeah. Okay. So that's Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shai, and the Gemara speaks it out. What's the nafkamina? My beinayu. Gemara says my beinayu. What happens if you have a person who on day one is potter from the mitzvahs? He's not supposed to go up to. He's potter from Re'iyah. He's potter from Chagiga. And why would he be potter? In this case, he's lame. Since he can't walk. The halach is he's potter from the mitzvah Re'iyah. We said the Re'iyah is something a person needs to be able to walk to go up. Re'iyah and Chagiga, we're going to treat them the same. You're potter from Re'iyah. You're potter from Chagiga. And therefore, this person on day one, he's lame, he broke his ankle, or he sprained his ankle, he can't go up. Wakes up the next morning, second day of Chalamayid, wakes up, his leg feels great. He says, you know what, I'm going to head up to Yerushalayim. What's the halacha? Is he chayiv to bring a chagiga or not? So Rabbi Yochanan would say pater, and Rabbi Shaya would say chayiv, because Rabbi Yochanan would say, yesterday you were pater, because he holds that the first day is the only time the triggering event happened, and on the first day, you're pater. If you're putter on the first day, you're never going to get chayiv again on the rest of the days. Whereas Rabbi Shaya says, no, every day there's a chayiv screaming out from Hashem. If you didn't do it yesterday, do it today. Now, if on the second day he wakes up and he asks himself, do I have to bring a chagiga today? Well, did you bring one yesterday? No. So then you have a chayiv to bring one today, Rabbi Shaya would say. Rabbi Yochanan would say, did you have a chayiv to bring one yesterday? No. Well, yesterday you missed the boat and you're done.
Didn't we learn in the Mishnah way back?
I don't know that. In this Masechta?
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, somewhere that if you put to the first, if you're sick, you can't. It doesn't
That's
matter.
this Gemara. This Gemara was the Gemara we were referencing then.
It's not your fault. Right. It's not your
This is
fault.
not about fault. It's just about you missed the boat.
Right.
Like, hey, there was a deal to get good flights. Expired. Like, you lost out on the
Right.
snooze, you lose. That's Rabbi Yochanan's argument.
So the question, this is all the Rabbanan anyway. This is
No. What we're discussing now is Min HaTorah, 100%, absolutely.
This,
This specifically what we're discussing now.
okay.
Okay, so now.
So
Yeah, no.
Just a
This is
quick
one
question.
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure we get to the difficult part. But yeah,
Right,
go ahead.
so let's say Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shai, I think we passed him like Rabbi Yochanan.
I'm not 100% sure,
Okay,
but let's assume.
Let's assume there's a machlokes, one way or the other. So we were talking about that is a suffix deraisa.
Great question. This isn't going to help. It's not going to help. Meaning it's a good thinking, but we have to make. Okay, no, we have to be economical about it.
Right.
Okay, so we're saying like this again. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shai are arguing over whether a person's tashlumin is a tashlumin of the first day, Rabbi Yochanan, or no, each day has its own chiyuv. What's the difference? The difference is what happens if on day one you were pater. Let's say you were late. So Gemara says like this. Umi Omar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi. And the way I'm going to explain this is based on the Sefer Shalmei Chagiga, which is one of the more achronish svarim. He has a mahalch in his Gemara that makes it a little bit simpler. He basically says as follows: Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shaya are arguing over the following question: do we say that when, the way I explained it earlier is true, but the way they explain it is a little bit more subtle. And they say, do we say that the chiyuv chagiga is dependent on the gavra, on the person, and he's capable of doing the mitzvah, or is it on the time? Is the time the mechayev? So Rabbi Yochanan, it seems over here by chagiga and Tashlumin says, since the gavra can't bring it because he himself is pater, once the gavra can't bring it, then he loses out even tomorrow, right? The fact that it's yontiv is irrelevant. Whereas Rabbi Shaya says, no, the fact that the guy himself can't bring it is irrelevant. The yontiv happens. You can't make it not yontiv. Yontiv is the mechayev. That's how he says it. Okay, so now let's move in the Gemara. Mi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Achi. How could it be that Rabbi Yochanan said that it goes with what? The gavra, that the person, when he's in a state that he can't bring it, that means you snooze, you lose, you're done. I'll bring you a case where you snooze, you don't lose. Let's see. Yeah? So I'm going to say it outside now. Just a very quick hakdama to the halachas of a nazir, that is tummy. The nazir, the halacha is, he's not allowed to drink wine, not allowed to do a lot of things. One of the things he's not allowed to do, very similar to a kohen gadol, is he's not allowed to be in contact with a tummy, with a mace. Same way, like a kohen is not allowed to go to a cemetery, a nazir is not allowed to go to a cemetery for the exact same reasons. And the halacha is, if he does come in contact with a dead body, his entire nazirus is recounted. So let's say it's a 30-day nazirus, he's got to start counting the 30 days again. He doesn't start right away. First, he has to become tahor from the tumah that he touched. That process is a 7-day process, and that 7-day process ends with a visit to the mikveh. Now, that visit to the mikveh then is followed by a night where he can't do anything because he has to wait for tomorrow morning to bring karbanos. And it's only once he brings those karbanos that now he is fully finished with his entire process of becoming tahor. He could start counting again now for his nazirus. Again, this is called a nazir, that's tamei. 7 days. Now, what happens if during those 7 days he experiences another tumah? Let's say for whatever reason he walks to another house and boom, there's another mace. Now, do we consider that a second tumah that he has to bring a second set of karbanos, or only one? So the answer, the Mishnah says, increases, you only bring one. In fact, you can see 100 maces during those 7 days. It doesn't make a difference. I mean, again, it'll extend how long he has to wait, because every time you touch a new one, it's another 7 days. But the karbanos being brought at the end are all going to be one, because it's just one long tumah arichta. It's just one long tumah. That everyone agrees with. And everyone would agree that if he, let's say, only saw one, then went to the mikveh, the next morning brings a carbon, and he starts counting his nazirus again, that if he saw another tamei mace, he would have another scenario where we have to go through that again and again and again. The question is, what's the halacha if in between? What happens if he went to the mikveh on the 7th day, the sun went down, it's that night? What happens if now he sees a mace? So he's already gone to the mikveh and he hasn't brought a carbon yet. So is he taller? No, he has to wait till tomorrow to bring his carbon.
Is the mikvah the last process?
No, the last thing he has to do is bring the carbon. So there are two possible scenarios. Either he sees the tamei mace at night, or he sees the tamei mace in the morning before he had an opportunity to bring the carbon.
You said he went to the mikvah already?
Went to the mikveh. And now he sees another tumah, touches another mace. Now, we said before that if he has a second tumah, third tumah, fourth tumah during the 7 days, everyone agrees you only bring one carbon at the end.
Is the question whether or not he's tar once he brings the carbon?
No. Everyone agrees that he's only going to become completely tar after the mikveh. Sorry, after the carbon.
Okay.
The question is, though, do we say that he's only going to be chayav one carbon, or is he going to be chayav a second carbon for the second tumah that he touched?
I would think a second. I would think a second.
Okay, so it'll depend.
Logically.
There's a Chizkiah and there's a Rabbi Yochanan. We'll see in a second. So I'm going to say it outside, yeah? So it goes like this. The logic goes as follows. I'll only be chayav a second carbon if one can say that there was a chalos chiyuv of a new carbon. Meaning, do we view the time that I had the opportunity to bring the carbon as having happened? The reason why I don't bring a second carbon during the 7 days is because I can't bring a carbon. There is no opportunity. The law says I got to wait 7 days, go to the mikvah, sleep over a night, wake up in the morning and bring a carbon. So if I wake up in the morning on the 8th day, and that's when I see the mace, everyone's going to agree I bring two karbanos. Because why? In the morning when I woke up, I was chayiv in a carbon. Now I became tamei. I go through this whole process again. At the end, I'm going to not need to bring two karbanos, one for the first tumah, one for the second tumah. But what happens if I do it at night? On the one hand, well, we know you're not allowed to bring karbanos at night. So I can't bring a carbon at night. Am I chayiv to bring a carbon? It's just I got to wait till the morning to do it? Or is at nighttime completely not? So now in Hilchas Tumah V'Tara, there's something called Laila is a Zman Chiyuv and not Zman Chiyuv, and we'll see that in the Gemara. The Gemara at this point is assuming you're not even chayiv at night. And Afal Pikin, we're going to see that Rabbi Yochanan holds that he's going to hold that the fact that at night you were not roy to bring it because it's nighttime, that does not mean tomorrow morning you can no longer bring the carbon. And that's going to be the question. What we're going to see over here is that just like Rabbi Yochanan says, that if you bring your carbon Chagiga on day one, therefore you lose out on doing it the rest of the time. Why does Rabbi Yochanan say that if I can't bring my carbon at night, which is always the halacha, why does he say I'm allowed to bring it the next day? Once I went to the mikveh, I became roy to bring a carbon, maybe not practically, but in concept, I'm already finished with my first tumah. Should it not now mean that the tumah, the second, exactly, because since it goes by the gavra, right? Meaning since it's the person who can't do it at night. Why? Because you're not allowed to bring a carbon at night. So therefore, exactly. Now, what's the reason why I can't bring a carbon at night? Because it's not the time for a carbon? No, it's because it's nighttime. I'm not allowed to bring a carbon at night. But I'm already done with the mikvah. My tahara process is finished. All I'm really waiting for is the morning to come.
In my head, I'm still focused on like the mikvah thing. So like once the mikvah is done, isn't the mikvah
Nope.
No, you have to get carbon.
You have to bring carbon.
But also, the mikvah represents the purification.
It's not over.
It's not the full. It's not the full.
Double young, right?
It's full yom. It's full yom.
Full yom.
Full yom. Yeah. So okay. So now, so let's.
Fixed in my head.
It's another
I know,
step.
I know that. No, I know that.
Now,
So
for some
that's
things you need it, for
really-
some things you don't. We'll see.
That's the end.
We'll see on Amud Beis. Okay. So now, like this. Let's see it inside. Says the Gemara. Umi Am Rabbi Yochanan Achi. And again, the way I'm explaining it is, how is it possible that Rabbi Yochanan is telling me that once the person himself can't bring the carbon chagiga because he himself is not roy to bring it, you can no longer bring it the rest of the days. V'ha'amar Chizkiya nitma biyom maybe, b'layla ina maybe. Chizkiya says if let's say you had the tumah happening after the mikvah, he says if it happened by day, then maybe, meaning you bring 2 karbanos. But if it happened by night, b'layla eno maybe. Why? Because since you were not able to bring the carbon that night, we don't view as your first tumah having ever finished. So therefore, this seeing of a tumah that night is just like another. It's no different than seeing it on day 4. Therefore, he says what sounds to me in the more logical approach. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan Amar, af belayla nami maybe. He says that no, even at night you bring a second carbon, implying that at night, even though you haven't yet become chayiv practically in the carbon, we still hold that the first tumah has ended, and seeing a tumah that night is a second tumah, and therefore you need 2 karbanos. And again, the question is why is that true? Why is it true that at that point we hold that you're chayiv to bring a second one? We shouldn't hold you chayiv until the morning, unless you tell me that the reason why is because the fact remains is that I'm potentially chayiv to bring it at night. It's just I can't bring it for an external reason. But conceptually I'm a chayiv. So since I'm chayiv, that's 2 karbanos. Why don't we say the same thing? Say that just like I couldn't bring mechagiga on day 1 of Sukkot, I can't bring it the rest of the time. Say the same thing over here. Since I can't bring it at night, I shouldn't have to bring this second carbon later. Gemara says, don't bring me kashas from Tumah. Why? Tumah, we see externally that it has a special halacha by tashlumin. What's the special halacha? You miss your carbon Pesach. 30 days later, you have a Pesach Sheni. So if that's the case, then that means you see that there obviously is something special about Tumah. That ain't a chinam. If we wouldn't be talking about Tumah, let's say like Chagiga, we would say this argument, Rabbi Yochanan's argument.
You still consider tamei until you bring the korban, even though you went to the mikvah.
The language you're using is a little bit not clear, meaning the mikvah accomplishes that on some level the tumah is gone, but practically,
Right,
let's say,
that's
for
why-
instance,
that's what's fixated
without
in my
going to the Beis Hamikdash, like for instance, without taking the carbon, you wouldn't be allowed to go into the Beis Hamikdash as a tamei.
Right.
But let's say you wouldn't be matama other people. Let's say so. There's it's try to think of it like the first hammer knocked the nail in halfway, and the second hammer knocked it all the way in. Mikvah does this, carbon does
You
that.
still have to wait until the day's over. 'Cause you're
Separate discussion. Yeah. Okay. Rabbi Yirmiyah. Shani Tuma, the Yesh L'Tashlum Pesach Sheni. Maskef Lo Rapapa. Rapapa has a question. This entire concept of pushing off Tuma, because Pesach Sheni is also a Tuma, right? Hani Chalamand Amr Pesach Sheni Tashlumin Derishanu. There is an opinion who says that it's actually Tashlumin, meaning that if you missed Carbon Pesach, you can now have a chiyuv to bring the Pesach Sheni, and it's a tashlumin of your original Carbon Pesach. According to the opinion who holds that Pesach Sheni is its own yontiv, and really there's a chiyuv to bring a carbon on Pesach Sheni. What is that chiyuv? Its own chiyuv. You lost out on Pesach because you were tamei. Sorry, Hashem as a chesed gives you an opportunity to do another carbon on Pesach Sheni. It's not a fulfillment of your Carbon Pesach. It's its own thing. Well, if that's the case, then Tumah is no different than anything else. And really the rules should apply by Tumah that it applies by Chagiga. And if it's true that by Chagiga, day 1, you're putter, the rest of the week, you should be putter, that's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. So then so too, Nazir that becomes Tameh shouldn't be any different. If at night he sees another Tumah, that